Howdy folks, welcome back. This is the Maine Prepper and I have my training weapon here with me in the barracks, and today we are going to talk about CQB slings, close quarter battle slings. Actually, we're just going to talk about rifle slings in general, and I'm not going to do a history of all of them out there. I'm just going to show you the one that I have and that I've made. Now, slings come in two kinds of, well, there's actually two predominant ones. There is a 2-point sling, which this is a 2-point because it is affixed to 2 points on the weapon. And then there's a single point sling, which usually is a very short version of this, and instead of attaching to the front of the weapon, as this one is, it simply attaches to your gear with some sort of a metallic hook or even a plastic one that allows you to affix it. I've seen people use a carabiner and some parachute cord, and they call it a wolf hook. There's all kinds of different names for these out there. But this is a 2-point sling. I recommend a 2-point because if you have a 1-point and you have to transition your weapon, it's going to be right here in front of you. So first of all, it's always going to be in the way. You'll never be able to put it back behind you. And secondly, if you get it and it drops down far enough, you draw your weapon out. When you go to run and move to your next position, it's going to be banging against your leg and being a serious problem, impinging your ability to move. Now people say, well, you know, if I do the duck walk, and the duck walk's that short little super high-speed SWAT walk. Let me tell you something. If somebody's opening fire on you, and this happened to me, the guy was ripping into us with a machine gun, and we had to get out of the kill zone. We didn't duck walk out of there, pal. We ran so fast out of there to get out of the line of fire, you wouldn't believe it. We weren't running away from the enemy, and the first one that says that, you're blocked. But we were running oblique, because we had to get over here to get behind cover so we could get back to our battle positions. Now, having said that, you ain't going to walk anywhere when you're getting shot at. You better be running, and you cannot run with this hanging down in front of your body where you're tripping on it. Okay, which brought up the next point on this type of sling. Most of the slings you see today have some bungee cord in them. Now, the way you wear this type of sling is you put your head through, and then you put your shooting arm through, and then the weapon can be shouldered and it can be held up, and you can actually one-hand this weapon and sight very accurately, and it holds it steady. Now you can probably do it without a sling, but if you've been hurt in this arm and this arm's just hanging there, you don't want to be muscling in with your other hand. So this will just hang there, and all I got to do is retain grip on the pistol grip. Notice my finger is always off the trigger, and my thumb is ready to hit the safety selector. From here, I can very easily get good side alignment, side picture if I needed to with one hand. And the other thing about this, with the bungee cord, it has tremendous stretch capability. So if I had to get and lean out of a window and shoot or whatever, I am not going to have this thing pulling me tight. Therefore, if I'm running and I catch this on something, or I'm climbing up and it snags, look at all of that stretch that I can get on this. What is it made out of? Well, that's a good question. We're going to actually make one together. But let me just talk about the basic components. It's an HK clip. It is tied on with loops of parachute cord run through a bite on this piece of 1/2-inch bungee cord, which is folded over and frapped with parachute cord. I don't know if you can see the little frappings there, the little grooves. And it has a hydration tube cover. Now you can get nylon sleeving somewhere, I'm told. I couldn't find it, so I just got a hydration tube cover, and it was exactly long enough. It's about a 4-foot piece of bungee cord, and maybe you can make it longer. The great thing is, if you need it longer, you can just put the loops of it longer with the parachute cord. And it's the same on one end as it is on the other, so it's very easy to make. This last piece, of course, is a piece of bicycle inner tube, and that's all it is. It's like 1.25-inch bike tube, old stuff. And if it's too old now, it's going to shred on you, so you don't want to get a really old one. Spend $3 and go get a new one. That's what I did. And cut it up, and the real hard part's going to be getting this over the top. And my video shows all that. So once that's good, it'll be up posted hopefully tomorrow. And then we can sit down together. It's got a materials list and everything in there. We'll sit down together and we'll make one. It'll be fun. I'll make coffee and maybe even some cornbread. Okay, now with this we need to talk about CQB a little bit, and we're going to talk about transition fire. Okay, folks, transition fire is not the pinnacle of all training events that you need to work on. What you need to focus on at first is being a good marksman, being able to accurately hit very finite and small targets by using very tight shooting positions, which we will show in the next series of videos here coming up. They'll run concurrent. You need to watch the ones about sight alignment, sight picture, breath control, etc., and then segue over and do shooting positions. But before you do, you need to have your gear that you're going to wear when you're in your shooting positions. Otherwise, it's going to be bizarre when you go from shooting without your gear on to shooting with it. That being said, you may feel uncomfortable wearing all of this at the range. Then again, you may go to the range and find everybody's dressed like this, and you're going to feel quite naked, and you'll wish you had brought your gear. So bring it in your car. If you don't feel comfortable, don't. Because when you're at the range, you need to be comfortable. That's the bottom line. I just want you to focus on shooting your weapon accurately. Ideal situation, shoot with all your gear on. And part of that means having the sling on your weapon that you're normally going to use. I don't encourage you to have 14 different kind of slings out there that you use for different events. I encourage you to stick with one and learn to work with that. Otherwise, it gets strange. I got issued a really nice sling in my last unit. And I gave it back to the guy. I said, no. And he looked at what I had. It's this homemade thing, and it didn't even look this nice. And he's laughing at me. I'm like, hey, look, if it's stupid and it works, it ain't stupid. And the thing is, I already used it both in Iraq and Afghanistan, that same one. So I was sold on it. I wasn't going to change horses in the middle of the race. Okay, so transition fire. I'm going to have to step on a few toes here. Folks, transition fire is misunderstood tremendously. If you're a SWAT officer, law enforcement, or somebody else, and you cannot engage a target because you have a serious concern about civilian safety, people that are beyond your target, and a lot of times it's when you're doing building clearing. You're in, you got some active shooter in a building, and he is blasting away, and now you got to get in there and get him. So you will transition over to your secondary weapon because you don't want to get in a little tiny schoolroom with little tiny kids and be zinging a high velocity round, and there you're going to be probably shooting him with a safety slug or perhaps a power, or rather a hydroshock type round or some sort of hollow point. Okay, I understand, I got that, and I'm not knocking that, and transition fire for you is a crucial part of your job because you are trying to do what's good, and I appreciate that. I appreciate very much that you are taking the safety of civilians so strongly, and that your training program inculcates that. For the rest of us, if we anticipate having to defend ourselves in a raw situation and you get into a serious gunfight and they've got rifles, you don't want to switch over to your pistol. And so here's reason number one you should not transition is because you have just fired your last round. Well, first of all, you should be watching your count in your head, okay? And even then, if you see a tracer push out towards the end of your shooting sequence, when you get to be about 24 or 25 rounds, you need to have your other next magazine ready. And so when you get to round 24 or 25, you can either switch out like so, or you can just drop that magazine on the ground and do a hot reload. That means you don't have to cycle. The last thing you want to do is fire and have the bolt locked to the rear, and then you got to stick a new magazine in and take your hand and slap it down on the bolt carrier group release handle. Okay, and by the way, if you do that, do it with the palm of your hand. Don't sit here with your finger. It's a gross motor skill. Pow! Slap your hand on there hard. Don't worry, she'll forgive you later for slapping her, but you got to get that closed. Better yet, don't let it cycle back to the rear. That's usually when I see people have jams and misfeeds anyway. It's because their weapon wasn't oiled very well. It locks to the rear, they stick in a new magazine, they hit the bolt release, and guess what? It doesn't feed the round all the way in. Then they got to hit the forward assist. All right. So that's the first reason not to do transition fire is because you have just shot yourself dry. And that's probably the biggest misconception people have is they'll fire, and when they're empty, instead of just doing a quick magazine change, they'll safe their weapon and they'll swivel it back behind them and they'll draw their secondary. That looks all kinds of cool and high speed. It has maximum CDI factor, which is chicks dig it factor, okay? And it makes you feel like you're Delta Force, etc. But in the back of your mind, you shouldn't be training that way. Look, if I'm your leader, I want this in the fight all the time. This is okay, but it's not preferable to this. This has range. This does not. So I need you to keep your primary in the fight, and so do you. This is going to be the thing that keeps you alive. You got more ammunition, you should, on your rig for this than you do for this. If you got it backwards, it may be because you're law enforcement and you anticipate having to use your pistol more. For the rest of us, it needs to be this way. The second reason you don't need to be doing this shouldn't be because your weapon jammed because it's dirty and not oiled properly. That's operator malfunction. I call it operator headspace and timing gauge is not set. And that means, and I've seen this happen before too, a soldier will have a jam and they'll come back and go, these M16s are pieces of crap. Well, you know what, in 1968, there were a lot of problems with them, but I never had a jam. Even in training, I've never had a problem except when I was given a bunch of blanks and no lube. I was at a school and they gave us blanks and they didn't give us any lube. And guess what? After about 30 rounds, you start having problems. After about 120, this thing had to be doing sports drills for every round you fired, okay? That's slap, pull, observe, release, tap, squeeze the trigger, okay? Sports. So, the second reason you don't want to transition is because you have a dirty weapon that jammed. Now, if it does jam up because you didn't clean your weapon, okay, understand. But try to clear that stoppage first. Don't just go, oh, I've got a jam. I've got less than 1/1,000,000th of a second before 1,000 zombies hit me. No, you actually have enough time to clear that. It takes, believe me, I did 1,000 repetitions of it, and I was at a training range, and the guy saw me do a sports drill, and he said, did you just do a sports drill? I said, yes. And he goes, I hardly even could see you do it, because it was just, I ran through it so quickly. I used to load crappy ammo into my training weapon so that I could get deliberate stoppages. I don't consider those to be jams. Those are deliberate training stoppages. I've never had the weapon foul up on me and refuse to work is what I mean by I've never had a jam. And it's never failed me in combat. The AR, it's never failed me. And anybody that's brought their weapon to me, whining and crying about how the weapon is being mean to them, hurting their little feelings, I have to tell them, let's see your weapon. And guess what? I take it apart and look at it. It's filthy and it's not lubed properly. So don't blame your weapon for your lack of attention to detail. Sorry to be so blunt, but it needs to be said. There's a lot of bad information being put out, and I'm going to try to set this straight. It's not that complicated. It's easy. Keep this thing clean and take good care of it, and it's going to take good care of you. Okay, so bang, 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 you're shooting. Now here's the problem with transition when you have a chest rig, and it's not that much of a problem. Some people teach you to drop your weapon and then draw your secondary. That's fine. But the problem with that is when you go to run, this thing is going to be in the way and it's going to be bouncing against your body. What you really want is this thing back behind you. So you want to practice throwing it back behind you. And you'll have to practice it a bit so you don't get a little too vigorous like I just did. But you swing it back behind you and it takes less than like a 1/10 of a second once you get good at it. You're shooting, you make sure before you transition that you hear click of safe. Take your booger hooker off the trigger, absolutely. And the way I teach people to do it is, if they put their hand up here to transition, I know their little booger hooker isn't on it, and they're not transitioning, and I've seen this happen. A guy transitioned, and his finger was here, and when it went around his back, his gear caught, right? He didn't have this kind of sling, he had a flat sling. It caught on his gear, his finger slipped down and pow! He fired one right into the dirt. And I tore him apart on that because that was his finger hitting the trigger. Now he tried to blame the weapon, of course, but I saw his little booger hooker because I was on the other side and I saw, you can see the trigger, you see the finger drop down, and I watched that. And when he went to do the transition, pow! He shot at the field mice, and they're protected species. You don't get to shoot them. So what I teach people to do when you're going to transition, safe, hand up here, and that way you know this isn't going to go in here. It's up here, and you swivel back and you draw your secondary. Oh, but wait! I don't have that much time. Yes, you do. You have the rest of your life, in fact. So don't get too so anal retentive precise over stuff in one area that you missed the big picture over here, okay? It's not all about getting this pistol out anyway. This should be like last ditch, unless you're a SWAT officer and you have to go in and you have to transition because you cannot. And usually you have enough time, enough warning. And that's the third part is transition sometimes is done by people because they're a little bit less focused on being proactive and they're way too focused on being reactive. When you get into combat or a firefight, you have time to be looking around and thinking and scanning and having an idea what's going on. Oh, I'm about to go into the classroom full of children. I've got time to safely transition, draw my weapon, make sure I'm good to go, ready. And the reason I just did that look down like that before I went in is because when I was I was in a course for rapid response to active shooter. And what they did was they handed us our weapons. They said, don't look at your weapon. We've already loaded it for you. You're not allowed to touch it. So we went in, and I went into the room. Well, I had just shot 5 rounds moving down the hallway. I won't go into that. But when I went into the room, the bad guy was there in front of me, and pop, I got him with a critical hit, but you had to make 2 or the actors wouldn't go down. Pop, and then I started squeezing my trigger, and then I did this. I swear to God, this happens to everybody the first time they do it. I looked at him, I looked at it. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to do your immediate action drill. I looked at my pistol. I'm admitting to stupidity here. I did that. And of course, he it looked like Walt Disney threw up on me. It was simunitions. He just shot me all over the face and the chest and everything else because I essentially didn't check my weapon before I went in, because when I went into the room, I was at slide lock already, I'm sorry, I had 1 round left in there, and had I checked my weapon, I might have noticed that something was amiss with it. I fired that 1 round, and instead of just going up, immediate action drill, I did this. So the reason I do that when I draw a pistol out is I just do a glance down at it real fast to make sure it's not at slide lock when I do it. All right. So, this is the type of sling we're going to make, and we're going to have a video. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it step by step. Pray to God. Yes, it's still processing. Man, it's killing me. If it doesn't process this time, I'm just going to have to cut this sling all apart and make it all over, and that means I love you guys. Okay, this has been the Maine Prepper, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and check back tomorrow or maybe the day after, and we should have the video up on actually making this sling. If that thing cooperates. All right, folks. Hey, thanks. One other thing too. This channel, I think, is just about 11,000 subs. I never realized I'd get past 1,000. So I hope I'm doing a good service here. I hope I'm doing my job right. I hope I'm doing well. I know many of you have contacted me offline. Let me know you appreciate what I'm doing. I apologize I can't keep up with a lot of the PMs. I've had to kind of prioritize a few things. I'm going through the med board process right now. I'm having to work with the attorney and everybody else, make sure everything is done exactly right. I don't know much about it, so and a lot of people have tried to tell me, and I appreciate it, but don't stop, because unless you just went through it last week, it's changed. So please, I appreciate it, but ceasefire. No ceasefire, no more, because I've gotten so much information and none of it's the same anymore. They've changed it just in the past few months, and now it's a new process. It's very streamlined, and the VA and the Army and everybody, they all sit in the same room together, so you don't have to reestablish the whole shooting match. That being said, I'm going to be here for a while in the program, perhaps another 10 months. So we'll continue as we are. We'll continue to march. We won't quit. We'll hang in there. And again, folks, thank you so much for your sponsorship, for your subscribing to this channel. And I appreciate everything that you say. I appreciate also the comments down there. The only time I don't like a comment is when you are ugly and rude to my other subscribers. If you attack one of my subscribers, especially a friend, you'll find out I am a fiercely loyal man, and I will not tolerate that. I'm very defensive of my friends, and please don't do that. And in fact, you shouldn't do that with anybody. Bad manners should not be tolerated, and I hope I never have them, and I certainly won't allow them here. So thanks for the rest of you, the other 10,999 of you who are so well behaved. Thank you again, and I will see you on the morrow.